Hey, good morning, everybody. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to give everybody, we're going to give this about 5 minutes or so until we kick it off, just for everyone to get in the room. So thanks for your patience.
Trying to figure out how to not share my screen for a minute because I need to, oh, there it is. Okay, I need to do one quick thing. Test. Test. Testing. Okay.
We can hear you fine. Thanks for joining us, everybody. We're just going to get started in another minute or two. So thanks for your patience. We'll be right there.
Nick, did you want me to record this?
Yes, that'd be
Yes.
great.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, it's being recorded.
Okay, great. Perfect. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so the room looks pretty full. Nick, do you want to kick it off?
Absolutely. Thanks, Chris. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. Good morning, good afternoon, good day, wherever you're calling from. And thank you for joining us. We've prepared a session here, and so we're going to get this kicked off, and hopefully everyone can hear. And everyone, if you are not on mute, please do everyone the favor and mute your phones unless you've got something to say or not. But anyway, we want to try to keep this very clean so everyone can hear. So to kick this off, COVID-19 has presented us with a great deal of uncertainty and financial strain. And 3 weeks ago, as we all know, we were enjoying a great season. And now we're just trying to figure out how to operate our business. A lot of different situations, both professionally and personally. And I am working from my home in Vermont, and I'm sure most of you are working from your home. But before we get too far into this, I just wanted to introduce myself, Nick Sargent, president of SIA. We've done a number of these in the past, and we're going to continue to do more. Says my internet connection is unstable, so if anyone loses me, please let me know. We understand that this is a new, uncharted territory and is presenting challenges that we never anticipated having to deal with. Our goal during this time is to provide our members with the resources and tools to get you through this crisis and to help chart a path forward for the industry in the short and the long term. To that end, we have launched SIA's Industry Hub on our website, snowsports.org. Please visit it for the most up-to-date resources, financial assistance, information, and tools. Again, snowsports.org/COVID Hub. This page is updated daily, so please check it frequently. And again, we are going to be updating this frequently. I can't say that or stress that enough. They also firmly believe that one of the most critical tools for success is to maintain the spirit and camaraderie of the winter community, to keep the lines of communication open and share with each other the hurdles and obstacles we are experiencing, as well as all our successes and hopes for the future. We aim to achieve this in two different ways. One, we ask you to join our Facebook group. Accessibility is on the Industry Hub. This is a communication point for all of us to trade ideas and best practices and ask and answer questions just to share what you're thinking, what you're feeling. We've also set up these town hall talks, and we're going to do this each Thursday for the foreseeable incoming weeks and months if we have to. These are intended to be a source of information for you in a place where your questions can be answered. Today's town hall is the first in this series, and we'll be in touch with more topics in the coming weeks, so please stay tuned. So in the meantime, I want to introduce our moderator. Many of you know Kristin Carpenter, the founder of Verde Brand Communications. Kristin has been a partner of ours for a while, guiding us with her insights on the retail marketplace, and now with her insights on how business can navigate the COVID-19 issue. If you haven't listened to our 2 Channel Mastery COVID-19 related podcasts yet, I strongly urge you, please do. They are listed on our Industry Hub and on our website. So please do yourself a favor and check these out. We'll kick this off with a short presentation by Kristin and then spend the majority of the time answering questions. Some of those that have been sent in advance, we'll answer as many as we can in the time that we have allotted. So please get your questions up as quickly as possible. To ask a question, just type it in the Q&A section on your desktop, which is just on the lower part of the window between participant and share, and we'll answer them in the order that they're received. Thanks again for everyone for joining. I know everyone is looking forward to this, and I know we have a lot to share. So thank you from all of this. Thanks to the SIA staff for helping set this up. But at this point, let me kick this over to Kristin now and have her walk us through this. Kristin, go ahead.
Thank you so much, Nick. And I just want everyone to know, you can hear me okay? Just to make sure. It says that my internet connection is unstable too. So everybody, please know that if things go sideways, we're just going to pop back on as soon as possible. So stay tethered to the platform here. I'm just so happy to be here today because honestly, I just want to be connected to all of you, to our amazing community. And just, this is where it's at, is just helping each other. I am going to get into how your brand can do that and look at some other examples of that. But ultimately what I'm here to do today is to bring my entire experience in my career, first as a journalist and then as the founder of Verde, and now as a nimble practitioner of virtual and digital communications. But point being is I'm here as a resource for you. So as Nick mentioned, we have produced 3 now podcasts. One, I believe, is dropping today, the 3rd in the series. I'm also going to be doing Facebook Lives begrudgingly on Mondays. because I'm trying to basically encourage our clients to do the same. And I'll talk about why in our time together today. But please just know that I'm here to serve today, and I'm more than happy to do it. And I have until about 12:20, I believe, Mountain Standard Time. I have a call I have to prepare for at 12:30. So just know that I'm planning on being here up until the very last minute I can be. And I'll be back to do more of these town halls to facilitate other resources for you as well. And let's just use this as a hub, a place to gather. No question is, not important. Everything you think of asking is going to help the entire community, I'm sure. And I'm just grateful that we have the tools that we do to be together virtually and to be able to see each other and talk to each other right now. All right. So with that, what I'm going to do here today is I'm going to basically provide a little bit of a deeper dive into the very first podcast that Verde did a couple of weeks ago, which basically talked about a 5-part framework that my team and I created specifically for specialty retailers and brands to communicate in the crisis. And it was built to, it's a framework that will evolve with the news cycle. And that's one of the main points I want to start with today. Whatever we talk about today is in the context of March 26th. I've never seen in my 20 years of doing communications and my 11 years of being a journalist and reporter prior to that, a faster news cycle than we're in right now. And a lot of what I'll be speaking about today was not in the first podcast. And it's about reading your audience sentiment with the news backdrop and enabling your brand to, I think, be nimble and conscientious in terms of how they're communicating, how you're communicating to your audiences, as well as the importance of doing that. Okay, so with that, I'm just going to go ahead and drop right in here. So number one, I just want to remind everybody, we are in the industry, we are in the community, and our communities that we serve through our shops or through our brands, the community of consumers really looks up to us as experts because we're in the industry. And I know that you know this. A lot of us are just humble and we don't think about it that way, but ultimately we're looked up to as resources and people, because of the nature of the industries that we're in. And Verde serves snow sports, cycling, outdoor, pet, beer, spirits, etc. Like really the products that define like the most fun facets of our lives. And those parts, those industries and those brands and even our retail shops become gathering places and almost part of the identities of the consumers that we serve. And that's really important to know because ultimately they see us as a trusted expert as an extension of that. And they really like put that on a soapbox and think about that when they're really suffering right now or struggling with anxiety or wondering about the future. I mean, there's so much uncertainty right now. I know you're feeling it as a person and your consumers are as well, but know that they look up to your brand or your store as a nice part of their lives, something they like looking forward to, something they want to visit again, something they feel part of. And ultimately, it's important today that we really take the time to understand our responsibility with that right now. And there's a responsibility in terms of how we show up, when we show up, but really the foundation is you need to show up. And you can't go dark. A lot of our clients today are incredibly overwhelmed with the amount of work that's going on, even though, things are kind of being put on hold and really scary news is being handed down in terms of spring order books, etc. There's still just a tremendous amount of work and blocking and tackling happening. And in so many cases, I've seen across Verde's client roster, a big part of the time, like people either don't prioritize their communication because they don't think it's important compared to the stack of other things that they have to do to keep the lights on and make payroll, or they just don't know what to say because they don't know what's appropriate and they might feel really shaken inside and they're not able to really have that energetic connection that they normally do with their audiences and their fan bases. So we're going to talk about some ways to adjust to that and really underscore the importance of showing up. And even if that means you're just going in and liking and sharing something that you like or that made you feel good or that you're proud of as another human being pulling something amazing together and putting it out there to serve. We have some examples of that. Believe me, I realize it's not all unicorns and rainbows right now, but there are some great things that you can share and feel good about sharing right now, I believe. So with that, I just want to overstress, you are an expert in the minds of your brand fans and your customers, okay? And it's important that you show up for them and don't go dark right now. So this is what we're going to talk about today, kind of the situation in terms of where we are in the coronavirus news cycle, our communications framework. I'll keep that minimal, but I'm going to really tailor that to Snow Sports Industries of America members. And then again, we'll talk about the importance of keeping your audiences engaged, how to do that, how to read their sentiment, and then we'll drop into the Q&A. So I'm going to make sure it's 11:15 right now, and I'm going to try and wrap up by probably 20 till noon Mountain Standard Time, just to make sure we have plenty of time for questions. So please know, and it doesn't, I mean, I'm happy to answer anything communications oriented, but Nick is also going to be able to answer other questions as well. So the town hall, spirit of the town hall is that you can bring your questions, whether they pertain to my topic or the SIA's resource in general. And I do have to say, I'm extremely proud to be working with SIA, because the people running this organization right now are just absolutely laser focused on being the resource that their membership needs them to be going forward. They are nimble and they are committed. So I'm very proud to be working with them and happy to serve here. All right, so let's go into the current landscape. So I don't need to remind you of all the things that you're experiencing in your business. Obviously, you know, the slide, you're going to have this whole slide deck, by the way. I'm just going to go ahead and talk about where we are in the news cycle today. So going through the last 2.5 weeks or so, 3 weeks, again, I've never seen a more tumultuous cycle where it literally snaps back and forth super quickly. Fridays used to be designated as kind of not the day to ever put a press release out unless it was something that you didn't want people to read about. We never would drop news on Fridays. Now I'm seeing a lot of news drop Friday, Saturday, and Sunday as people are struggling to get news out in and around this on a federal level. You're also starting to see, you know, government entities use text to communicate with huge groups of people. Consumers are definitely linked 100% like a lifeline to their browsers right now. And we'll talk a little bit about what that's going to do in terms of consumer sentiment and behavior going forward. There are some people putting some good guesses together around that. But really what I want to talk with you about is kind of the cycle that we've been in to date. So I think that things really like we've had 3 drops is what we call them at Verde. So where you literally wake up and you start to consume what's happening on your browser and your computer, on your phone, and you realize a big change has happened. And I think one of the most marked ones was when this was called a pandemic. And just the shift of energy, there was a sense of panic, people kind of running into their basement and almost pulling like the covers over their head. That was the feeling that was out there. So it was very much like a recoiling, like pulling back and trying to really protect yourself and kind of take stock of like, okay, a bomb just dropped. I need to assess the damage. And that's kind of where we were for a while, like say maybe 4 or 5 days. We started to really kind of see from there, things were not exactly improving, but there wasn't a major news drop. I mean, we've definitely seen the stock market can definitely influence this energy that I'm talking about in terms of just the mass audience that we're all part of, and in terms of how we're navigating this crisis. But ultimately, like that, the day that the pandemic was announced and kind of the incredible volatility of the markets after that was a really big drop out of the 3 that we've experienced. And now we're going into more, I think, of an endemic drop, right? So we're starting to see how it's affecting us as retailers, as in the specialty markets, and frankly, just what life's going to be like. And knowing, the hardest part, I think, is just not knowing what the horizon line is or the uncertainty. And that's ultimately what we're all reacting to. So what we've noticed is people are still hunkered down, and obviously they're being told to do that. And we're seeing a high level of responsibility around that, but they're starting to kind of look around and see like, okay, how can I stay connected? And oftentimes that's through generosity. And so you're starting to see some brands do that and some people do that. And I do think that there's some good stuff happening on that front. So that's kind of where we are right now. It's not going to stay there. And as we continue to go forward, like we're now seeing stimulus packages, there's different news headlines. We're starting to realize, okay, like We see experts we trust pontificating how long this is going to last. Try not to pay attention to those news headlines as much as you can, because nobody can really say how long this is going to last. Even though we are looking at China as a comp, for example, and I have in our notes from the webinar today, I can include some things that many of you have probably already seen on that particular front. Our country is obviously much different, and the way that the municipalities and the state governments and the national governments are handling this is much different. So it's just keep in mind, like, it's great that people are putting that out there, but nobody can look in a crystal ball. So point being is we can't really control much of what's going on, but what we can do is really, really pay attention to like the sense of the audience. You're part of that audience. And as you're talking to your peers and your friends and checking in with your family, just get a sense of some of the commonalities you're hearing them bring up and talk about. So for us this week, it was really feeling heartened when we're starting to see some interesting news headlines about companies and brands giving to retailers and retailers giving to their communities and vice versa. So there is a little bit of a feeling like, okay, we're in this for a long time, and now what do we do? So that's my next thing I wanted to talk about before we get into the framework, is the fact that we realize with this uncertainty, there's really not a lot we can control at all. But one thing we can control is how we show up. And I mean as people, but also as a brand. So one thing that has become crystal clear to my team and I at Verde is that employees within organizations are looking to those organizations as like the trusted source for information and news. The more open and transparent you can be with your employees right now, the better. And I realize a lot of businesses this week literally are having to make changes to their workforce. Those things are extremely difficult to communicate with. You can use the framework to use, best practice that as well. But just know that your internal workforce as a business is your employee team, your contractors, et cetera. Your close externals would be your reps, your retailers if you're a brand, or vice versa, your brands if you're a retailer. Your community, you can kind of segment, okay, I have to communicate with my internal workforce, close external, then it's your audience beyond that. And it's important to stay communicative to all three. And again, they need to hear from you. So try not to go into the basement and pull the covers over your head. Just show up, give them the facts, never pontificate. That's why I say, like, hold off from like sharing news headlines. Give them the facts as you know it, how it affects what's going on at your company. Don't sugarcoat it, but at the same time, don't do shock and awe. Just say, hey, we're monitoring the situation. We're going to do everything we can to be open and transparent with you on what we have to do. I know this isn't easy and it goes deeper than a webinar, but my point is more communication is better than less communication right now. So I'm just going to go ahead and jump into the framework. And it really starts with exactly what I just said. The first step is identifying and prioritizing your audiences. This may sound like Captain Obvious, I realize, but in a case, during a time like this, in a crisis, you need to pull your leadership team together, even if it's just two of you, or maybe it's just you and a couple of like really trusted employees. And think about this. Think about who are your audiences? Obviously, as I said, starts with your workforce as if it's family, right? They need to be communicated with first. You should never want them to read or hear anything about their jobs or their company from outside of the company before you get in front of them. Very, very important, because during a crisis, sometimes we can forget the steps here. And that's why it's really critical that you get with your people that you trust that lead your company and really identify, okay, these are our top three. Then you want to set a goal and a guiding principle. And what I mean by that is exactly what I said. And that is essentially, what is the goal? Like, from a cultural standpoint, how do you want to lead right now? And that comes down to honest, transparent communication and regular communication. And keep in mind too, no matter what you have to do to manage your company right now and the people who work there and are tied to your company, everybody understands that there's an unprecedented event happening right now that is influencing what you have to do in your company. And the more stand up you are handling this, the better. Keep in mind that your workforce, whether they remain working for you or unfortunately have to be laid off or furloughed or whatever it is right now, they deserve to be, you know, treated this way with being communicated with first. And then, as you know, they will go out, and if they feel they were treated fairly, they are going to reflect positively on you as they talk about the experience. Absolutely critical. So you want to just treat people how you want to be treated. It's that simple. Even if it's difficult to do, these conversations are not easy. The one thing we have going for us, I don't think anybody can blame us right now, because so much of this is outside of our control. So with that, those are the guiding, you know, example of some guiding principles. But really, it's about keeping your employees or your close stakeholders safety first, continuing to serve customers with the highest standards, meaning you want to make sure that you're answering customer service feeds, you're being responsive on social media, etc. And then be a great corporate citizen. I don't care if you're the tiniest business in business today, you are a corporate citizen when it comes down to it. The same way we're all taking this very personally in terms of flattening the curve of this virus spreading. Your company has a lot of reach, no matter how big or small you are. And the example that you set in terms of how you set your employees up to do exactly that, to do their part in slowing the spread of this virus, the more that reflects positively on you. And frankly, there's no tolerance right now among audiences and sentiment for companies that are not doing that. I have to do a webinar next week for the National Bicycle Dealers Association. And one of the things I have to address there is helping some of the bicycle shop owners in different states and municipalities who are being allowed to be, you know, their doors kept open, and, you know, enable them to understand, like, how do I best communicate if I end up getting flack for that? And so that's something that is it's very real. Like, there's almost a little bit of a shaming going on just culturally right now. And it's, I think, coming from the right place, but keep in mind that the ethics of your company, your culture are on display by the decisions that you're making around responding to what your government needs you to do right now, and also just what's the best thing for society and humanity as a whole. So employee safety should really define all of that and should be your top goal. And then going from there, honesty, transparency, communication, and making sure you're reacting and responding to any feeds or customer service. So the third step is looking at your channels. I mean, obviously my agency produces the Channel Mastery podcast. SIA co-produces that with us. And that's all about understanding how consumers are using different channels to communicate, engage with, discover, convert to brands. And we've been doing that for about 2 years now, and it's constantly changing. So as we go into this volatile time and this time of uncertainty, realize that the channels that you believe people might be communicating most through and trusting into your brand or your shop may not be what they're using now, because they're not in a transaction mindset. They're in an information seeking mindset, and they're looking for resources, and they're looking for connection with brands and shops and entities like athletes, etc., who they trust. So keep in mind, a channel evaluation is just as important as an audience evaluation. I've noticed, for example, a lot of people are using Facebook right now because I think all of us know that everybody's on it, even though we may not love it. There's just a big reach there. And I think people are actually tuning into their news feeds. There also is a very strong sentiment to not trust social media right now. So that's another reason why, if I'm a fan of a brand or I love this shop, I like to think I can trust their content because I know the people who are there putting out the content. That's why athletes and influencers are so important right now. If you are using them as extensions of your brand, because what they say people really trust. And keep in mind, this is not about transacting or harvesting. This is about serving people right now. So I just want to make sure that you're aware that your channels that you're normally communicating through and that you count on your community to communicate through might be changing. And then your newsletters. I wanted to talk about email because I'm pretty sure everybody on this line, on this webinar today, has been absolutely inundated with email since this whole crisis has started. It's almost like if you even thought about a brand 5 years ago, they're emailing you. I mean, probably 25 to 50 of them a day right now that we don't really have time to see or look at are infiltrating our inbox. And it's just insane. So what I'm about to say may seem counterintuitive, but email from a trusted brand email from a retailer, email from an athlete or an ambassador that doesn't have like our COVID response in the subject line. Maybe it's something where you're serving instead, and I can give some examples. Those still will be opened. Your open rate will probably be higher. So keep in mind, people will be looking for things like that, and they're just looking at the choss that's coming in and deleting it before they're even opening it. But if they see something coming from you and they're used to hearing from you, they'll open it. If you haven't been communicating via email for some time, it's a little bit of a tricky time right now to kind of like jump into that current from the side of the river. But at the same time, it doesn't hurt to just try and start warming up your audience. And I wouldn't make it about here's how our business is managing COVID. That's something you could easily pin on your website, like put something on your website homepage. But ultimately, it's not a bad idea to try and rekindle the relationship you have with your house email list. If you haven't been going out to them for some time, just keep in mind, they are getting inundated with COVID-19, here's what our business is doing, et cetera. What they will open is, I've seen a couple great examples. I saw one yesterday from that eyewear company, 100%, where they basically are taking some of their highest profile athletes and sharing their Spotify training music lists with them. So that's going to get opened. Whether I own a pair of those sunglasses or not, I will open that email because that's cool and I'm training indoors right now or whatever. So think about where your audience is, what they're doing at home while they're on quarantine, and how your brand can get in front of them to serve them in an entertaining way, in a resource-driven way, etc. And also with that email, keep in mind, it's better to have it come from a person within your organization, not so much just your brand or your retail shop. So if there's an owner who's willing to be the author on those, that looks better than just, having it come from your brand. People are really looking for connection. The other thing I want to say is, as I've said, make sure you're monitoring your social feeds, and I'll get into that in the 5th step of the framework, but you want to make sure that you're being very consistent. So for example, if you are kicking off like a warm-up campaign to your email list, and say, hey, we're going to email every other week to check in on you, or every week we're going to send a very quick email with a resource from our brand that we hope will serve you right now. You have to do what you're going to say you're going to do. One of the most important things a brand or a retailer can do right now in the specialty brand realm is to be consistent and to follow up and say what you're going to do. This is the time to build trust, and it will be a very deep trust if you're consistent and you're showing resources that are serving your audience right now. That is probably the number one reason to not go dark. When people do start to recover, and it will happen when this lifts and people are allowed to leave their homes and allowed to transact again and gather, believe me, your brand will be very well positioned if you keep your audience warm. And I mean, serve them, stay in touch with them, follow what they're doing, understand their sentiment. Just make that a priority right now. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and go into a little bit of an outline for step 4. Number 1, keep up to speed on the CDC best practices. Every single business should be doing that. And then again, this is a bit of an outline for communicating with your internal workforce and some of your close external stakeholders. This defines kind of how you're going to be continually changing how you're dealing with this. We just went through this with a couple of our brands around states that have issued shelter in place, don't leave your home unless you are, need to mandatorily go to work, et cetera. Like literally that just happened for Colorado last night. It started this morning. So that means the companies that we serve in Colorado have to initiate another outreach effort to employees that are in the state. Same goes for if you have reps or whatever in different states that are going through this, you have to keep your eye on the ball in terms of like states that are changing what they're doing. So we're helping brands communicate around that. And that's, again, internal. You don't want to go ahead and fire off an email about that to everybody on your list. If you've already checked the box of saying, we're with you during this, we're making changes here. If you've done that a couple weeks back, I would say you're probably good, but remember, you need to be in front of your audience in a resourceful, serving way on your social channels and your email, etc. And with your internal workforce, I'm saying you need to keep them updated and apprised as this situation continues to unfold. So that's what this step 4 is about, is basically a mini framework within the framework, or an outline. your team knows this is a living plan. Things are changing fast. Just remind them of that. Tell them about any fact-based operational changes that you have, and then provide additional reassurance and let them know when you're going to be back in front of them again. I sent something out to my team on Monday of this week saying, hey, we're in another very uncertain time this week. We've, ended the week with this bit of news. These are the facts I know today. I'm going to be in front of you with a video call Wednesdays and Friday, and we have our staff meeting Thursday. Like, I basically teed up the whole week on Monday, so they feel like when they come in, they know what they're going to get, at least from us at work, from a communication standpoint. And that's really important right now. That tethers them with a sense of trust. And keep in mind, when we do get through this, if you treat your employees well, or your contractors, or just the people who help you run your business and make it exceptional, if you treat them well right now, you're going to have a better chance of plugging them back in if you're not able to keep them on through the crisis. And that's going to help you get back up to speed and ready to do business when the recovery does start. The businesses that are in that position are going to be able to make leaps and bounds of progress faster than those who are going to kind of be pulling together a new team, just starting communication, et cetera. So I just think, consider it you're a living, breathing brand. You're living in real life through your social channels to your audiences right now. And then I already touched on this, but minding your channels right now is super, super important, especially as we unfortunately might be looking to change our organizational structure right now. So if, for example, you have to furlough or lay off, and you're the company leader or CEO, you are going to need to start monitoring your social media channels. I mean, you can't let them go dark, and you can't let them not be monitored right now. You have to do that. So that is a key priority. And you also need to consider like how you're going to communicate out from your business to your publics. If you have to, again, change your staff internally, that's something that can't be turned off. You want to make sure that your people who are out there following your brand, who you're serving, know that you're getting through this with them, that you're not out of business, that you're just taking steps forward, and you need to communicate to convey that. Also, using your brand to support other great initiatives by sharing things with your audiences, etc., will endear your audience to you, the way that you're using your reach for positive change, for example, or for support during this crazy time. I want to just reiterate how important it is to make sure you're sharing fact-based content, and update when you have something to post. Like, don't just be there for the sake of being there. If you're sharing something that you know is fact-based, share it. If you like, meaning you don't have to post 3 days a week for the sake of posting 3 days a week, but please post at least once a week right now, if not twice a week, on some of your key channels. And maybe drop one email every other week if you don't have anything substantial to share. But if you have something substantial, a shorter email, or if you have your audience expecting something, just show up on that calendar. And what you can do is just work hard to figure out what your audience needs. So I wanted to spend some time talking about, in this framework here, step 5, how to understand what is going to resonate with your audience well. Because this is the number one question that I get from all different kinds of businesses in the specialty markets that Verde and Channel Mastery serve. So the way that we are advising clients to do this, and the way that we're doing this internally, is we're essentially looking at the free analytics tools that come with our social media platform. So we obviously are on all of the major social media platforms, either for Verde or for our clients. And we use a service that also helps us do auto scheduling, such as Hootsuite. That's one example of one. There's several. So all of those social, Twitter, Instagram, et cetera, they all have data built in where you can kind of see how people are engaging with and sharing your posts. And oftentimes the Hootsuite type of service and solution consolidates all of that into one graph, which is great. You want to share that with your leadership colleagues so that they too can start to get that intuitive feel of where your audience is. And you want to be looking at that every day. Same is true with your email service provider. If you're sending out emails, study the analytics. It's really important to know what people click through, which ones had great open rates, which ones bombed, okay? And it's just important to know that. And then as you're looking also maybe at your competitive set, you can look at how their posts are doing by how well shared they are. And that's just, those are 3 ways you can gauge audience sentiment. Don't be hesitant, though, to pick up a call or direct message some of your really ardent fans and ask them before you're about to do a social push on something. People are usually super excited to share their comments and their thoughts with you in terms of like, if you don't want to go out with a campaign before you check in with them. For example, one of the brands that we help, Carpenter North America, we are working right now with them to potentially work to bring some visibility and relief to indoor climbing gym owners who have had to shut their doors right now. And we're working with a couple other brands to potentially help, make what they're doing stronger, or perhaps do our own thing to help them. But we're essentially like working together to help this entity in this group. So before we go ahead with that, we are going to check in with some of our, most ardent fans and make sure that works for them. We just don't want to operate from a vacuum right now, period, the end. So that's my point. I just want to make sure you need to go to your audience and try to understand their sentiment before you post anything of substance right now. And that's really important. We have clients we're working on campaigns right now that are coming out in 2 weeks, that we are literally building everything, and we're communicating with media that we're launching those with and saying, we won't put this out if the backdrop of news changes precipitously. We are not going to put this out. We have to be mindful of where people's heads are at. And what's most important is having them read and consume the news and have their experience with that, not what we're promoting here. So we're going to wait until the time is right. So that's just underscores again, you have to be nimble right now. Okay, so I already went through a lot of this. And again, I'm going to be sharing this with you. And video conferencing, I'm going to go ahead and dive in there because we really need to get to question and answer. We're at 11:41 Mountain Time. I'm going to take a few more minutes to talk about this. Within the last 2 weeks, we have essentially launched capability to bring virtual events to media. We're helping brands go through a sales cycle with Spring 21 that are not having the capability to pull together a sales meeting. Sales reps are being asked to do more than they ever have with less resourcing. So we're trying to help with virtual solutions. And that's something that every single business should be looking at right now. And I know all of you have probably seen a lot of creative ideation around this and campaigns launching, but you're seeing also just an overwhelming amount of them. I want to advise you not to feel like there's no room for me in this. It's already being done. There will be a way that you're going to have to use this tool to get in front of your audiences because of the situation that we're in. We're literally quarantined. So it is important to put some thought behind what can you do. And that's why I was doing my podcast on Facebook Live on Monday, because I wanted our audience at Channel Mastery to see, I don't love doing that either, but I'm going to do it because it's a great way to connect with people right now and to show up for them right now. So that's something that you can consider doing, is just test and learn on a few things, using some of the platforms you have available to you, like Facebook Live. And, you could even do that to a closed group of Facebook followers. Like, you can do some things so it doesn't maybe feel so scary or broad reaching, but keep in mind, understanding some of the basics around this technology, such as Zoom, such as Facebook Live, etc. There are many, many tools for this that will help facilitate it, but video is going to become incredibly important, even more so going forward, because consumers are literally tethered to their browsers and they are hungering to connect with people. And video and podcasts are a lot more effective at that than a blog. They may also like their blog, okay? I'm not the only person who buys an audiobook and the hardcover, I'm sure. People just consume content the way they like, and that's something that you could even ask your audience about. But my point is get used to going live on Instagram or Facebook, etc. Just try it. People really connect with that, and they want to connect with people right now. We will include some resources for you on this in, kind of an overview that we'll be sending out with the slides here, but don't be afraid to look into taking it digital and virtual right now, because you just have to get rid of the belief that that's not something you're good at or you're not good at tech. What you are good at is running a specialty brand or retailer, okay, or retail entity. What you're really good at is serving a community that's super passionate about what you do. And ultimately, you just need to change up how you do that going through this crisis. And honestly, coming out the other side with those skills will enable you to show up, connect right back in, and transact going forward. So again, keeping your audience warm is great. showing up for them literally is great through visual content. Those are 2 ways to keep your audience warm so that when we are ready to go back into business mode, you have a pond to fish in. And what I mean by that is an audience for your brand that has not been ignored. Super, super important. Okay, so I wanted to share a couple of good examples, companies doing good. Again, I'm going to put links to this in a follow-up document because I want to really hurry and make time for questions. But our client Kitsbo converted their North Carolina apparel factory to make masks and plastic face shields. We helped promote that. We didn't go crazy, but that has totally taken off. And they've made the kind of the blueprint for that available to other factories. So very, very cool stuff going on. You'll get this deck, so you'll be able to read about it, but I also want to give a shout out to Evo. I really think what they did with the 42,000 plus worth of PTO that their homebound hourly employees donated was huge. There's also numerous examples out there, but point being is there's a lot of examples of brands trying to use their reach for positive change, and retailers as well. So make sure you check that out. And if it resonates with you, post it or give it a share so that more people are aware of it. Or if it's something like a cause they can join, that's super powerful to do as well. All right, I am ready for Q&A time. So I'm going to go ahead, and I have access to some questions in here, and then I'm going to ask that Nick maybe unmutes himself. So I'm just going to drop right in and okay. So Lita, welcome Lita. Lita says, I hear you're talking about retailers and vendors. Independent reps hold a different position. I have a lot of thoughts to share on independent reps. So I'm going to maybe go ahead and just address the plight of the rep right now, because ultimately the strength, I think, and the identity that a rep holds, the value that they bring is almost like that key triangulation point between community, buyer, brand. And oftentimes they are powerful influencers. They are highly trusted resources. And honestly, they are going nowhere. So any of this talk that you hear about, oh, you know, virtual tools could replace reps, absolutely not. Great reps are going to learn how to use virtual tools to reach more people on behalf of their brands and to serve their buyers better. And there's a million ways to, you know, receive training on that or whatnot, but know like that is going to be key for you. So I'm assuming you're going to need to morph and probably work with 5 or 6 different brands at virtual sales meetings and try and get everything that you need to do your job around that. Keep in mind, all you can do is your best. Show up the best you can and tell your buyers, like, how can I serve you? I can't come in and show you and let you touch and feel this product. How can I serve you? I'm planning on doing, you know, my live stream, etc. Like, just stay in touch with them. And then every brand that you represent may have a different playbook as well. So just keep in mind, the more questions that you could ask so that you can be in that like powerful triangulation position, more needed than ever right now. And I'm happy to like field more questions if there are more reps on the line around that. But essentially, yes, you're going to be asked to do more than you've ever been asked to do, especially with spring and fall 21, in terms of achieving purchase orders and traction with your brands, with buyers. It's a super volatile time. People are putting orders on hold or canceling entirely while we're selling in a new season. I've never seen anything like this. I'm sure you haven't either, but we have to continue to make forward progress. And in your case, as a rep, forward progress means arming yourself with the ability to bring yourself to your stakeholders using these virtual tools. And that literally could be some fake it before you make it. But literally, like, that's how I would start. And I would find out who my most, you know, my closest buyer relationships, what tools are they most important with, what are comfortable with, what do they like using? And then I wouldn't worry. I would also tap into organizations like SIA or Grassroots Outdoor Alliance, for example, and ask them, what are you hearing is more of a standard for, you know, buyers in terms of receiving these virtual buying presentations. And keep in mind too, brands will be presenting the line. They're going to obviously do their best to resource reps, but your business relationship, that filter is still going to be needed. So I wouldn't just rely on like a brand offering, here's what we're doing for a visual merchandising, or here's how we're presenting the line. That's all fine and good. You want to take that tool and you want to take it and use it to serve your buyers in the highly personalized way that they're used to receiving from you. That's going to make you more valuable than ever. So I hope that helped. And it's great that you're here. So another question that I have is text marketing strategies that retailers can use. And this is from Doug Works. So thank you so much. That's a great question. As I said, I think pretty early in the webinar, people are, I think, receiving texts. If they have kids, there's a lot of texting back and forth about what's happening with their kids' schools. I received a text last night and this morning about the state of Colorado basically putting us on a homebound, a much higher level of don't leave the house unless you absolutely have to stop the spread of the virus. I love, with Channel Mastery, one of the things I love most about researching those shows is understanding how consumer sentiment is changing. I believe that text will become a more important channel for consumers. We definitely don't ever want to clog that with promotions and things like that. I mean, I think consumers are wary of it because if they haven't turned off their notifications, they get way too much from their social media platform as it is. They might get spammy, crappy text marketing from something they didn't subscribe to. And so they might have a bad taste in their mouth. But now I think coming through this, they're probably realizing that it's a useful channel for them. And I think if the brands are very mindful and communicate with their end consumers, like, you know, how can we communicate with you in a way that brings value? That is probably going to be something that will be more accepted through this crisis and after this crisis. I just highly advise that you go to your audience and find out what they're going to find the most benefit from in a text. I also think this is true with the airlines. We often look at the airlines. We did 2.5 weeks ago for sure, in terms of what consumer sentiment setting would be happening by what the airlines were doing. So if you look at how the airlines are serving their consumers, for people who opt in to receive texts about flight updates and information, that's useful and people welcome that. So think about that thought process from the consumer side, and you are a consumer. If I know I'm going to receive value from this and it's going to help me on my device, I'm going to say yes to this. And if you can provide that like value through that lens, I think that you're going to be fine. I just wouldn't do it in a vacuum. I would definitely ask your audience how you can serve them that way. Okay, and Doug also shared a link to Board Retailers, BOARD, retailers.org. It's a resource that's updated daily, and he said it's a COVID-19 retailer resource guide. And I bet in that, Doug, there's probably a lot of updates from what's happening on the federal level too. So that would be a great resource for everybody. And we'll put that in the, I always say show notes from the podcast. We'll put it in the recap email that we'll be sending out from SIA. Okay, let's see what other questions we have. Okay, so an anonymous attendee says, we have not been updating social media like we should have been. Is this a time to reappear? So today, March 26th, could definitely be a time to reappear. And I'm going to give you a couple strategies to do that in a way that maybe will be a little more covert for you. So I would definitely, first, I'm assuming we're going to talk about some social channels and through an email. I think putting together something short and conversational in an email saying, we've wanted to be respectful of your time and where you are in terms of navigating this crisis, but we wanted to reach out to you today to let you know that we are going to be pulling together some resourceful content and sending it out once a week, every other week, whatever it is, and then stick to that, okay? But let them know what you're going to be doing. Let them know why you haven't been communicating, and then go forward and see what the open rate is. Chances are you might have some drop off. If you have a decent open rate, just keep following what you said you're going to do and think about serving first, never transacting right now. You want to serve, and that might mean like, here are some great resources that we found, or here's some interesting reads we found, or everybody's looking for fun content. Did you see what Red Bull's doing over here? I'm just throwing out some examples where you might aggregate one or two things for your audience to look at that you know that they would be into. So That's something that you could create a newsletter out of, a short, succinct, this is how we're going to show up in your inbox, and then stick to it. And then you could take a version of that and post it on some of your social channels and see how that does. So you can test and learn with that, see how people are engaging with the content. And then I think the other top strategy here is to start going in and following the conversation that your audiences are following. So if you see people like sharing that are in your audience, go and like that content or comment and try and further the conversation. So you're showing up, and that way, like when you start to post things, people won't be like so surprised by it because they'll start seeing you showing up and commenting on things in an authentic way. Just don't go dark. So I'm very happy to hear that you're considering going back and turning the light on here. Okay, so a question from John Mortensen. What are stores doing to keep employees so they don't go on unemployment? So this might be something for you, Nick. I can definitely talk about the communication around that, but do you want to address that one head on, and then I'll talk about communication?
Sure. Yeah. So, John, thanks for the question. Appreciate it. We have a lot of retailers that we've been speaking with who are in this very similar situation of what to do with employees while either the store is closed or to keep them off unemployment. A number of retailers we've spoken with have kept those employees on and have them either working from home or have given them a time when they can report back to work. My thought there is that time when they might be able to report back to work is going to get pushed out, as we're all learning as we go here. But I also have been on the phone with other retailers who are reaching out to their lenders and doing some short loans to cover the lack of capital coming into their store to keep their employees on employment. I do know that there are some new laws and rules that have just been put in place around keeping full-time employees and guaranteeing their pay during this time. We'll have more information to share with you in the next week when we learn more about these situations and these new rules and laws that are being put in place. And as we read through the information and dissect what that means for all of us. So I will say, stay tuned. We'll be updating our COVID page on snowsports.org with more information there. Anything you want to add to that, Kristin?
Again, I just want to emphasize the importance of, communicating. Obviously, I think any employee who's going through an adjustment like that would understand with the backdrop. If they end up having to not work right now, it's important to stay in communication with them if you're hoping to hire them back, or even if you just regard them as a friend and a person, as so many of us do in our industries. So just the point of being as open and honest as you can, be fact-based in your communication, and try and be level with your tone. And I think that goes a long way just in terms of building trust with your internal workforce, and hopefully will keep the people that you want to deploy close to you and ready to come back in when you need them, when the lights do turn back on, and they will turn back on. Okay. So I wanted to also address, there's another question here. What are strategies to connect with shops and dealers during this time? Is this the right time to push dealers to order? Should reps be waiting to get orders during these times? That's a fantastic question. And I think that the strategies that we've talked through today in terms of going to where your audience is can definitely apply in terms of reps and retailers and orders and whatnot. So if you are able to put yourself in the shoes of the retailer and you're a brand and you're realizing they're not open for business, if they're not an essential business to stay open, think about that and think about where they are and where their head probably is with all of that. A really great way to do that is just to check in on them personally. One of the things that we talked about as a team yesterday as we were planning this webinar was, how is it appropriate to tap into, if you're a retailer, or a rep brands for content right now. Absolutely. So if you're looking at as a retailer and like, what should I put in my newsletter? What should I post on my social media to keep my community and my audience warm? Don't hesitate to pull content that might be entertaining or resourceful from your brands. And what you get to do with that is put it present it in a way that makes it very relevant to your local community. So that's a way to stay working with your brands during this crisis and also serve your community from what they're creating from the brand itself. But I would think, during a time like this, it's probably not something to be pushy about in terms of orders, but I will tell you, especially on the bicycle side of the business, I have been hearing that people are still transacting. I mean, I think a lot of it might have to do with kids' bikes and wanting to get kids out of the house and exercising. I'm not sure. Just keep in mind that there is a sentiment out there around, if you're not following whatever rules your state and municipality have put in place around social distancing, and even in some cases with cycling, for example, if you're like posting social media about, hey, go ride your bike, it's beautiful or something, there are people in the community right now who see that as irresponsible because they're anticipating that hospital beds might get too full. And if you injure yourself, you might take one of those beds that might be needed, even though I think a lot of places in the country aren't to that point yet. It's still a sensitivity. And I would be remiss in not telling you that there may be some people out there who are just hypersensitive to it. So you want to make sure that you're, again, trying to really lock into where your audience is. But to go back to your question, I would, if you have a trusted rep who's a great friend, call and talk to them about it. If you are checking in on your dealers, check in on your dealers just personally. And if they're interested in transacting with you, my guess is they'll probably mention that. And then think about, when you hang up the phone or finish that email, how can I serve them? What is a way that I could help them right now, even if it's little? And maybe even just calling to check in on them is that. That's going to go a long way. As everybody on this webinar knows, the best part about being in these industries is our relationships with each other. Okay, so Gary has a great question. Gary Hull, can you give us some concrete examples of resourceful content? I will definitely put some links in the notes, but I'm trying to think of a couple things off the top of my head. What I'm doing right here is an example of that, and the podcast that we've been producing, even for SIA prior to this crisis that we're in, is resourceful content. So now is not the time to harvest. Now is the time to be serving. That's the number one rule. So if you could look through, like if you have two choices to create content around, and one is like talking about a sale, very basic example, and one is talking about, I'm trying to think of a great example. It's tough for me to think of it on the fly, but my point is the resourceful is you're bringing something to your audience. Like, here's some tips that you can do here. You're seeing a lot of, here's a great example, a lot in the cycling market. There are a number of online digital and virtual coaching solutions. They're making that available free right now for the next month because they know people might be working out on their bikes indoors. That's a great example of being resourceful as a brand. What I explained that Evo was doing is definitely resourceful, and that's something you could like and share to your audience. Like, look at what this brand's doing. Does it inspire you to do anything else that you can with your business or with your family and friends? That's resourceful, in that it might inspire them to take positive action that they normally wouldn't think to take. I did a webinar with the AMGA recently, and this was like last week or a week and a half ago, and that's the American Mountain Guides Association. And I think a lot of the guides were really frozen in place. Like, they didn't know what to do. They literally like went from having like their calendar of everything they were going to do to not being able to work at all. And one of the things that I offered them from a resource-based content standpoint is, here are some things you can do to get your communications house in order. You can create a crisis communication plan. You can create a marketing plan. Like, you can do things that you're normally not doing because you're out in the field. So let's say you serve people who are like that, who are, out in the field often, and they're now stuck in their home. What can your brand do that might resource them to make the best use of their time right now to actually like retool and reemerge after this crisis settles, and they can just go forward with something that they built while they were at home? I hope that that's clarifying for you, but know that we'll put some really, really concrete examples of like places you could look online for resource-based content. Great question though. Thank you, Gordon, for your note there. And Gordon says to stay healthy and safe for everybody. And let's see. Okay, Nick, here's one for you with leftover inventory and
Oh, yes.
delays on preseason ships. I think we
Exactly.
could couple those together.
We can. So leftover inventory, this is something that you'll need to discuss with your vendor and come up with a plan on how to move that. And I think that's something that a lot of manufacturer suppliers are having conversations with their retailers regarding inventory pricing, et cetera. And along the lines of preseason shipments, we are hearing from a lot of our members that a lot of product is in transit as we speak, which was a surprise to hear. But we're also hearing that some of the product, whether it's hard goods or soft goods, could be delayed upwards of 2 to 4 to 6 weeks. So we're monitoring that every week, trying to keep that number forward for the industry. And we know that this may be an issue as we get into summer, and some of those preseason shipments might be pushed back even longer. But again, sticking to Kristin's advice, we want to be fact-based here and not spread any rumors or get anyone too excited. To that though, and to my earlier comment, I was very pleased to hear that there were a lot of product that was in transit, and Chinese factories are up and running and almost at capacity. So that's some good news there. I will share, we were talking about this yesterday, that there is a container shortage globally, and the disruption that the the world experienced with China going offline for a couple of months and a lot of empty containers staying at their destination and not being returned is causing a disruption as well. So we're monitoring that. And I think the other thing to think about and to talk about with your brands and your reps and your retailers is what is going to be the sample status for season 21-22, and we're monitoring that as well. So we have a few things that we're working on, and we'll be updating you as we get more and more information about inventory, preseason shipping, transportation, and samples. So please stay in touch.
Days forthcoming where we can go deeper on these topics, and getting your feedback on some of the priority topics would help us shape that content for you. One of the things, there's another question in here, but before I get to it, and it's a great question, I want to also just let everybody know, and I'm sure as a consumer yourself or a person going through this crisis yourself, you're obviously tethered to your browser. That's where I think we're staying connected and getting our news. Keep in mind that even as things come back online, experts are saying that, people will be a little slower to come into physical retail, physical experiences than maybe we're seeing in comps in China, et cetera. So that means that being in front of your audiences, obviously on social media with newsletters, any way that they can get that through their computer is really important, that they become used to hearing from you there. So that's another reason that you want to really make sure that you don't go dark on your digital channels. And you want to basically be there and keep your audience warm and be consistent there, because that's ultimately where you're going to be communicating with them, probably more so as we come out of this. I do think going into this, the very last webinar we did together, which I think was just over 3 weeks ago, was talking about all of the every single trend that we read in Q4 and Q1 before this hit was about people really being eager to re-engage with each other in person and being tired of being on their devices 5.5 hours a day. Some of you might have been on that and remember, but now we are immediately put into this quarantine situation. I do believe that people are going to be super eager to get back out and experience life, especially knowing that the nicer weather months are emerging, thankfully. But at the same time, consumer behavior will impact like how quickly they do that, and just the way things continue to evolve with this fast changing, unpredictable virus that we're all trying to navigate our businesses around. So with that, I wanted to go into Lexi's question here. How do you feel about conservation and outdoor recreation policy and advocacy content right now, or in 3 weeks? It's a great question. Beth Cochran, hey, she agrees with me. She's another PR pro. So Lexi, you have a great question here. I think that it's fine to post conservation and outdoor recreation content as long as your brand or your business are not saying, get outside and enjoy this. Even though we all know if we can get outside and we can maintain social distancing and not hurt ourselves, it's great to get outside right now. It's super healing. That's not going to go anywhere. That's always been in place, and it's going to be really important as we're emerging from this absolutely unprecedented time. At the same time, you again will put a target on your back if you're advocating for people to go, for example, backcountry skiing. I understand that a lot of retailers and brands are having just a lot of sales in that right now because the areas were shut down a month early, and people still want to ski. We never are advocating that our brands go after that in terms of a positioning point or a call to action for their audiences, because ultimately if they end up getting injured, that could hurt. Or if you're going backcountry skiing in a group, that could be unfavorable for some people in the audience. So you have to be hyper sensitive about social distancing, not going out in groups, and also not hurting yourself right now, because people are incredibly sensitive about doing the right thing, also as corporate citizens, but also just as citizens. And you want to make sure you're being very cognizant of that in your content. If you want to talk about the importance of outdoor recreation for the healing of this, eventually great, or important conservation initiatives, great. I just wouldn't say go outside, because I think that'll put a target on your back. And then you ask in 3 weeks, it's really anybody's guess what's going to happen in 3 weeks. But as I said earlier in the presentation, we have a couple of fun campaigns lined up for some brands that if they're going to come across as tone deaf, because there will be some different headlines emerging in 2 or 3 weeks as this virus progresses, we're not going to post anything like that. We want to be incredibly cognizant of where people's heads and hearts are going through this crisis in their lives. Of course, we want to be there to offer resourceful, entertaining things for them to keep them happy and aligned, or maybe on a goal or connected to a community that they love. But we have to do that secondarily to what's happening in the news, because of just the weight and the nature of what we're dealing with here. It's like nothing I've ever dealt with before, and we have to be incredibly careful how we handle it. So that's my advice. I hope that Beth Cochran would agree. Let's see. I think there's another one that came in. Awesome. Okay. Jennifer Oliver, thanks for your question. Do you think that when the isolation is lifted, that businesses will surge, or do you think people are still going to have caution going into stores, restaurants? Are people eager to spend money, buy gear, and play? Those are great questions. I think I just addressed that. People looking into their crystal ball now and saying China being a comp, we can't say that they're apples to apples comp with how the American consumer will react to this. And we also have to look at it demographically. I think there's a study I'll put a link to on millennial consumer behavior around what's happening right now in this crisis. And they're not doing anything surprising. Obviously, they're being super thrifty and resourceful and not buying anything they don't need, and really being mindful of following the social distancing, et cetera. That's it's like a huge consumer contingency that is really important to watch. So I think that looking at demographics, Jennifer, is also really important. So if your brand or your business serves a big millennial base, understand how the consumer sentiment is going for that group right now through this. Keep your eye on that. I do think people are going to want to spend money and want to get that flywheel of the economy going again, but I think they're going to be very cautious depending on how this plays out in terms of the scale of the virus hitting the United States. And I think that that is something we just need to watch, and we can't pin, it's going to go this direction or this direction. We just need to see how it goes. And I know that's probably not the answer you wanted, but always, go to your audience and look at sentiment before you make any moves is all I can say. Okay, I have 6 more minutes. So let's see. Anonymous attendee has an idea for reps, both in-house and independent. So spring 20 clinics or live streaming for them for retailers. Great. Okay. With travel restricted and spring 21 sell-in seasons tightened up, it's a great way for dealers to connect with reps in a more personal manner while getting their staff ready to return to normalcy. It also saves a lot of travel costs for independent reps. Absolutely right. And as I was saying before, to Lita's question, you could really become a valuable resource right now by just ditching any kind of identity belief you might have, like I'm not technical or I can't do that or that would be hard, and just start building a little place in your maybe it's your office at home or your garage. Make a place where you might be able to practice filming line demos before you have to do it in person in the next 6 weeks or 4 weeks or 8 weeks. It is going to be part of what you do. And I think that the reps who are forward looking are going to see how important that will be for them to leverage and scale the value that they bring to both their buyers and their brands. So keep in mind, like, you're absolutely spot on with this, but start practicing now, start to become an expert at that now, and you'll be surprised at the leadership role that you're going to take with your peers. So thank you so much for sharing that. Okay. It looks like there's a lot of conversation happening around virtual and digital. So look into that and really try and resource yourself for as much as you can. I also wanted to bring up a point that we talked about yesterday in our meeting. It looks like our questions have kind of flattened out a little bit, but keep in mind, if you're home and you have time right now to be, again, up-leveling your communications or marketing plan, or perhaps if you're a business and you do have to furlough or lay off people, or your people are not able to do what they were supposed to be doing at this time, and maybe they have some time, train them. There's so many great online training resources. I know Camber Outdoors is offering some great things on diversity, equity, and inclusion. Conservation Alliance, those are 2 Verde clients. Conservation Alliance always has fantastic resource information on their website that are all digitally consumable. This is a great time to challenge your team to, learn something new or achieve a new level of fluency in something that they do, that they contribute to your company. And employees really, really value that when an employer is able to invest in them like that. And oftentimes these training solutions don't cost that much money. So it's a great way to, I think, invest in your team while we're going through this crisis. Okay. So Clive Ripley does want to point out to everybody that it actually is a real thing. If you're advocating for outdoor recreation through your business or your brand, that isn't responsible to do. He's basically saying, in Europe, there's a very strong movement against going outdoors right now. You can tune into I'm a big cyclist, so that's why I always talk about cycling. But if you tune into Cycling News or velonews.com, any of those sites, you can see that a lot of the cyclists, the pro cyclists themselves, are using their social media to get people who follow them to understand how important it is to stay inside. And I think it's Italy and Spain are not even allowed to ride outside right now because they are afraid that people could crash and take hospital beds. And that's a very real thing in Europe. So know that with the internet, global sentiment is over here as well, and you just have to be hyper cognizant of that. So I think that was the last question I had. Let me know what you would like me to do here, Nick, in terms of potentially wrapping up.
Yeah, I think this has been a very productive town hall meeting, and I think we've covered a lot of ground. And more importantly, we really created some good conversation and communication with our community. And so I think with that, we could probably end it. We're just a couple minutes early, maybe 2, but I'm okay with that if you're okay with that. And I'm sure the listeners are as well. But just a couple things on my end, just to, one, thank everyone for joining the call, and we hope you found it beneficial. If you have any additional questions, please feel free to email us at info@snowsports.org, and we'll be in touch with you immediately. Also, from myself and my staff, we're here for you during these tough times, and please lean on us, and we'll get through this, and we'll become stronger because of it. And if you have some other ideas and topics for the hub in future webinars, please reach out to us and share those. We love new idea and fresh ideas. And the person who mentioned the board retailers resource, we will put that on the hub as well, so you can have access to that. And I think, just in closing, and just to mirror what Kristin was mentioning about being responsible in the outdoors, we are in a very tough time. We all know that. Practicing the social distancing is going to be extremely important for us, but if done correctly and diligently, it's going to get us outdoors quicker. And I know that's what we all want. But we really need to think twice about getting outside and onto the mountain, into the backcountry, and how we choose to be outside. And that is a real issue that I know that we're all just starting to work and deal with. And we're going to launch a program called Ski at Home, and so you can practice what you do at home, and most importantly, put us in a place where we are reducing our community's involvement with emergency services, hospitals, doctors, so on and so forth. So please think about that. Posting your epic backcountry adventure with your 10 best buddies probably isn't the smartest thing. It just creates more interest in getting out in a way. So let's be considerate there. So with that, I just wanted to say one more time, thank you very much. Stay healthy and have a good day. Kristin, thanks so much for your help, and we look forward to talking to you again real soon.
Thank you. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.